All right, so this morning's message is going to start in Luke 9:45. I'll give you a second to get there. Today's message is the mystery of the least, and we're going to be talking about how God uses the least people, the least amount that we think we can give. But as long as we have the willingness to give it, God will use it in amazing ways. So Luke 9:45. An argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and made him stand beside him. Then he said to them, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you all who is the greatest." So the disciples are really, really thick sometimes. And Jesus, I assume, is giving some sort of sermon. And he's talking about actually how he's going to die and telling them this. And of course they never hear. And this particular time it's because they're all arguing about which one of them is the greatest. So Jesus just stops them and says, no, hold on a second. Let me tell you how this works. And he pulls a child out of the crowd, sets him next to him and says, "This boy right here, whichever one of you can pay attention to him, whichever one of you spends time with him and can look him in the eye and really welcome him as an equal, that's which one of you is the greatest." Because what God wants from us is for us to be able to humble ourselves and for us to be able to reach out to those in the least. And we can't do that if we are all trying to decide who's the greatest. God used this many times, using those who thought they were the least to do amazing things. It starts out with Gideon. "How can I save Israel? My clan is the least in Manasseh, and I am the least of my family. I'm from a nobody family. I'm not even anybody in my family. How can you use me?" And yet God chose him. God chose him to lead this small little army against an army bigger than probably most of Israel right now. And again, Saul answered, "But am I not a Benjamite from the least tribe of Israel? And is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? I'm nobody. I'm from a small family, from a small clan, and you want me to be king? Really, God? You want me to lead everyone? I can't do that." But God had chosen him. God wants to use the least of us, not the least of us, those who do not think highly of themselves, because then God can truly show what he can do. Even Paul, "For I am the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God." God, it's me. You know my past. I can't do this. Because what I've done is just too horrible. And yet God chose him. God used him to bring about many, many, many churches throughout all of, not just the Jewish world, but also all of the world around. God doesn't necessarily need great people. God doesn't want great people to show what he can do. What God really wants is people who are willing to give God everything they have. There's another story that we've talked about several times before. The feeding of the 5,000. And God used the smallest of all things to do this. I can just imagine one day there's this little family just kind of starting out. They have one little boy, probably about 6 or 7. And suddenly there's a commotion outside their house. And somebody running by, they can hear yelling, "Jesus is here, Jesus is here." And of course this is the man they've heard so much about. So they're all excited and they want to go see him. Somebody's, probably mom, is smart enough to say, "Do we need food? No, we'll be back soon enough." The little boy says, "I'm hungry though." So they pack him a snack and they head out. they sit and listen to Jesus give this amazing speech, this great sermon, and they feel that this man is really something. But then it starts to get late. And later, because after Jesus is done giving a sermon, he goes around and talks to people. And they're just so excited to see them, especially the little boy. He doesn't even know why he's excited. He just knows Jesus is coming. But as it gets later, everybody starts to get hungry, and Jesus looks to the disciples and asks, what are we going to do? We need to feed these people. The disciples say, we don't have any money. How are we going to feed all these people? So they start going around and seeing what people have, if anybody has anything. And they come to this small family, and the little boy just starts getting so excited because I have this snack. I have a couple of crackers and some fish. Jesus needs food. I have food. I want to give it to him. And the parents are probably telling them, shh, no, don't worry about it. That's nothing. You don't have much to give. All that is just a little snack that we packed for you. How is that going to help? But he's young, he's persistent, and he really wants to give this to Jesus. So the disciples take him to Jesus. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? Here this little boy is, so excited to give his lunch. But when he finally gets in Jesus' presence, suddenly he doesn't feel quite as excited. It doesn't feel like enough. And Jesus' friends, who probably know better, are telling here, we have something, but it's not really much of anything. He probably gets a little bit downhearted, maybe starts to walk away with his lunch, because what can it do? But Jesus stops him and says, wait, I can use this. So he takes the food from the little boy, and he starts to pray. Father, thank you so much for this little boy and his willingness to give what he had. I ask that you would bless this and use it for everyone. God, multiply this and let people know that I am your son through this little boy. So he tells the little boy, go get your family, and he starts handing out this little snack. And there's plenty, and the boy sits there in wonder and amazement as he sits eating his crackers and watching Jesus pass out the food, his snack, to everybody around. The disciples start passing out his food, and there's plenty, and the boy is so excited because this is his lunch. All he had was just a couple little loaves of bread, a little bit of fish, and he was willing to give it, and Jesus did amazing things with it. For it is the one who is least among you all who is the greatest. Jesus didn't want to use the people who thought they were great. He told the disciples this because in order to really help someone, in order to make a difference, you have to be willing to humble yourself, and you have to be willing to serve. Because that's what people need. God is there to be a leader, but what people need is a servant, someone who is willing to help them, to show them love, and to bring them closer to God. Jesus told a parable once. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all other guests, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. God is willing to do amazing things, and he does all the time. But we have to be willing to accept his help. And to do that, we have to be willing to admit that we're not enough on our own. God will use those that humble themselves. But for those who already think they're good enough, to think they're good enough on their own, God can't use that. So, the mystery of the least is not about being the least or thinking the least of yourself. It's about the amazing things that God can do when we are able to offer ourselves, everything we have, no matter how least we think it is.